Hello, everybody. My name is Dusan Cheneas, one of the communication managers for the Digi4Live project, and I want to welcome you to the Digi4Live Webinar Series, Part 1, Harnessing Digital Tools for Animal Welfare, Breeding, and Traceability. We can go to the next slide. We're going to start off with our speakers and agenda. So first, our speaker is Dr. Jarkko Niemi, Digi4Live project coordinator, and he will be presenting an overview of the Digi4Live project. And he's a partner from the Natural Resource Institute of Finland, Luke. After him, we'll be having Dr. Matti Pastel from the Natural Resource Institute of Finland, or Luke. He's a work package free leader in the Digi4Live project, and he'll be giving an overview of the case studies in the Digi4Live project. Next slide, please. Afterwards, we're going to be having engineer Peter Hogver from the Wageningen University and Research, who will be presenting case study A. Afterwards, we will be having Dr. Engineer Joanna Marszewka from the Institute of Genetics and Animal Biotechnology of the Polish Academy of Science, presenting case study B. Next one. We'll be then finalizing our presentations of the case studies with Dr. Jean-Pierre Bidanel from the French National Institute for Agriculture, Food and Environment, presenting case study D, and with him with him presenting case study D will be his colleague Dr. Alael Gonzalez Garcia. Next slide, please. So a couple of guidelines for the webinar. The webinar will last 1 hour and 30 minutes. Each presentation about the case studies will be followed by a poll for the audience participation, so you can interact more easily with the presenters. If you have any questions, write them in the comments and specify to whom the questions are directed, as we'll be having a dedicated Q&A session that will be held at the end to address all of these questions. Please keep your cameras and microphones off during the presentations if you're not the one presenting, and ensure you have a stable internet connection and use a compatible browser for the best experience, so you don't have to be logging in and logging off constantly. Feel free to react or share your thoughts in the chat, and each presentation will be timed so the speakers will stay within their time slots. With this being said, I would hand off the next part to Dr. Jarkko Niemi.
Okay, thank you, Dusan, for the introduction. Next slide, please. So I will be presenting Digi4Live in a nutshell, and the full title of the project is Supporting the Potentials of Digital and Data-Driven Solutions for Livestock Tracking, or in short, Digi4Live. And I'm the coordinator of this project. So Digi4Live is an EU-funded Horizon Europe coordination and support action that has started last year, and it helps the European livestock sector to leverage digital technologies and data. And it's coordinated by a Natural Resources Institute of Finland, and we have 11 work packages altogether and then 15 partners. And in the project, we employ quite strong multi-actor approach, and now we are implementing 6 case studies, some of which you will hear today, and then there will be another webinar about 3 remaining case studies. And in these case studies, data use concepts are created together with different actors. Next slide, please. So, why are we implementing this project? Well, there are several reasons. Just to mention some of those. There are several points how we can improve livestock sector data and exploitation of novel technologies in the livestock sector. And one could claim that the data are the currency of the future. But unfortunately, there's inadequate data harmonization, standardization, and interoperability. So there's lots of data that being generated, but it is not exploited as well as it could be exploited for the benefit of the sector. There's also, to some extent, limited technology use and inefficiencies of solutions for animal tracking, health and policy monitoring, and so on. So with this project, we can help to provide and support evidence about data-driven solutions and how data and technologies can be used to support, for instance, decision-making at different stages of the sector. And these digital technologies can benefit not only the private sector, but also public sectors, administrative and policy processes. For instance, artificial intelligence and data spaces are good for saving time and resources that are spent especially in routine tasks. So we could make the life of farmers easier, and at the same time help policy processes. And one important task for the project is also to boost collaboration between different actors who are working with livestock sector or livestock sector data. Next slide, please. So as part of the project, we are also going to have so-called thematic expert panels. So these are groups of experts which we will invite to specific dedicated meetings around certain topics. You can see the themes of 4 thematic expert panel groups in the screen. So they will be focusing on data, interoperability and standardization, different digital tools and technologies, societal, regulatory and legal issues, and data sharing and exploitation. So if you are interested in this, please visit our website and join the pool of thematic expert panel experts. Next slide, please. So the ultimate goal of Digi4Live is to increase the capacity of livestock sector in Europe to benefit from data generating and digital technologies. And as a project, we will demonstrate how enhanced standardization, communication, and data exchange, and also repurposed data use can, as well as digital technologies, can benefit farmers, food and technology businesses, and also streamline public administration processes. And the technologies and concepts that we are going to look at include, for example, data spaces, which are quite topical in Europe at the moment, sensor technologies, artificial intelligence, and data governance frameworks. And we look at these in order to support more reliable and synergetic data sharing and use in the livestock sector, and also exploitation of technologies. And overall, and especially through these case studies and concepts that will be mostly determined by using experiences that we gain from the case studies, we will aim to empower the European livestock industry to effectively use digital technologies and data for different purposes. And some expected key results of the project include, for instance, an inventory of livestock tracking solutions, which will be available soon. We will be also working on, for instance, data-driven welfare quality for providing animal welfare information that we will hear more about in a few minutes. We will be also working on better approaches to use AI in the livestock sector, as well as digital tools for supporting policy monitoring and as well as working on a digital product passport. So this was a snapshot of the project. Overall, we will be engaging and communicating with a large number of different stakeholders. So please follow up the project. And the next slide, I think this was the last one. So then I hand over to Matti.
Okay, thank you, Jarkko. Thanks, Dusan, for the introduction. So I will briefly introducing like the overall frame why we have these case studies, and then we will move on to the presentation of the 3 first case studies in this webinar, and then we'll have a second webinar on the 19th of March on the second batch. So the next slide, please. So Digi4Live is a coordination and support action, and then the case studies have been planned to support digitalization concepts in a bit the idea that we should have case studies that give something European-wide potential for the implementation. So this is a little bit different from, let's say, innovation actions, where you might be going more towards a product, and we are more oriented in developing digitalization concept in a way that it supports the overall aims of the project. So we have different application areas, and then we also have a range of different technologies. And the main point is to identify barriers and opportunities for each of these solutions, identify the stakeholder needs and roles for the case studies. And then also there actually hasn't been that much research where you have good environmental and economics analysis of digitalization solution. So it's also an important project that while we implement the case studies, we are also collecting these key performance indicators for each case study and then conduct an impact analysis after we have completed the case studies. And you can engage with us in the case studies by providing data or feedback. So next slide, please. So we have these 6 case studies. So we have animal health and welfare and resilience and transparency, animal tracking, breeding, environment and policy administration. And we'll see 3 of these today, and then we will, as I said, to have a second webinar. And across these case studies, we are trying to identify the connections and of course collaborate within the consortium, but also with stakeholders. The key technologies here would be data space technologies, the use of different types of sensors, the use of artificial intelligence and data governance. And these topics are in all of the case studies, but now we have planned the webinar that this one is maybe towards a bit more oriented towards, let's say, a livestock sector. And then our second webinar will be a little bit more technology oriented in looking into the data space technologies and artificial intelligence. Another way could be say that, okay, today we are maybe even more application oriented than the next time. But I believe hopefully, well, you are here for the first webinar and hopefully many of you will be interested in the second one as well. So, but yeah, I will give now the floor to the actual case study. So you will see what's going on. So next slide, please. And yeah, Peter, please go ahead.
Can I just interrupt here because I think some people can't see the presentation. If they're having problems, can they write to the chat box? Thanks.
Thank you, Matti, for the introduction. I want to tell you something about the generation of new data sets to be used for animal health and welfare. We have a cooperation with the company Optifarm, and they have a lot of experience of gathering data on farms. So I thought he would be the best to present what is done in the field now. So he will do the second half of this presentation. And if there are difficult questions related to the broiler farming, then Ingrid will be available. Ingrid de Jong will be available to answer those questions. Please, next question or next slide. We would like to get some answers. What's the matter? Can you understand me?
Peter?
At the end of the presentation, I would like to have these questions answered, because it's for us very important to have farmers interested in the project. So if you have ideas how we can interest farmers to participate in the project, we are very pleased to get those suggestions. We think we can see also some value for farmers. But if you have additional possibilities to get value for farmers, then we are pleased to receive those suggestions. And well, the services bring an advantage for not only the farmers, but also for the sector itself. And so one of the questions is, we ask ourselves, how can we find ways to pay the application of the IAA services and not to leave all the costs with the farmer? Next slide, please. Well, there are a lot of systems and sensors already installed on farms, and we ask ourselves the questions, how can we benefit from those systems and let the animal health benefit from it? We chose to work in the broiler production chain, And we have there two items we want to work on. The first is the circadian rhythm. The hypothesis is there that flocks with an impaired resilience show a deviating circadian rhythm. So that means that that those animals are more sensitive for disruptions and might have more health problems if there are problems with the on the farm. The other point is that we want to detect diseases and health problems, and the hypothesis is there. Whale flocks with systematic diseases or intestinal health problems show abnormalities in water intake. And the problems we are looking for is locomotion products, contact dermatitis. It's an affection of the skin, of the soles of the feet, heels, and chest. That there are restrictions in natural behavior, heat stress related problems, and intestinal health for the animals, and interaction between hereditary trails and the environment. Next slide, please. Well, our core focus will be to improve the insight in the animal health and welfare. And as already mentioned, we want to use data of systems that are already on farms, installed on farms. And the main aspect we want to focus on is the water intake profiles. And if it's possible, we want to get also additional data of other farm systems, for instance, temperature and humidity, ventilation, so climate information of the farms, the lighting settings. And also we would like to get some information that has the farmer receives from, for instance, back from the slaughters, pododermitis, hookburn and detections, for instance. And the farmer might score some things during the life cycle of the broilers, culls, mortality, and medication. If we want to motivate the farmer, then the AA service shall also create some value for the farmer. And yeah, as already said, farmer involvement in the project is for us a critical success factor. We need to get data from farms. We think that the IA service is not only beneficial for the farmer and for the animal health, but it can help to optimize the planning of the slaughterhouse. It can increase transparency to the consumer, and it can decrease the environmental impact. And maybe it's possible to have earlier and more targeted veterinarian interventions. Next slide. Now it's your expertise, David, so please continue.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. And morning, everybody, or afternoon, depending where you are. Achievements so far for ourselves here at Optifarm. Well, we've got a lot of data connections to all the major control panels and sensors around the world, somewhere around 35 panels and sensor systems. So we're completely agnostic. We tether to the data that is already out there on farm. We have some farms in the Netherlands connected to this project already, so that's been running for several months, and we have a database of historical farm production cycles. I have my own farming business, so we have 45 barns where we've got a lot of data from, but we've also got a lot of data from existing clients elsewhere. We have an artificial intelligence model that's built, and it tracks and detects changes in drinking behavior, and that's really the key to this, and I'll show you that in the next slide. But initial data science has been conducted around health and circadian rhythm. So our own data science suggests there are very strong correlations here, but we want to demonstrate that within this project. And version 1 of our AI model is built and being added into our live user app as we speak. So it'll be live with our clients in the next couple of weeks. We have engaged with the Dutch broiler sector, both at processor level, feed company level, veterinarians, and several farmers as well. So that's where we are. Next slide, please. This is just a slide to show you how we do the basis of the initial trigger, if you like. So we track for 3 days the drinking activity of animals. We actually do it with broilers, layers, and pigs. And based on the 3-day patterns, so how much water is flowing through a water meter every 15 minutes for 3 days, it's possible to predict the next 15 minutes before it occurs. If, as here on the right-hand side, you then get an outcome that is lower for that time of day than has been seen for the last 3 days, calculated in a prediction model, we know the drinking behavior has changed. We don't know it's a problem at that stage, but we do know the drinking behavior and hence the activity in those barns has changed. We then want to go on to discover the why. Next slide, please. So what we do is the artificial intelligence then screens all the other data we can see from all the other data sources, and there may be many data sources for one farm or just one, and we're looking for patterns, connections, and correlations to work out what happened in the time frame just before the drinking behavior has changed in its routine and its pattern. And from that, you're really determining, are they hot, are they cold, are they sick, are they hungry? Are they in natural rhythms? Is there a welfare problem? What is it that's going on? So we're exploring the data. Next slide, please. We've done a lot of initial data science. I won't go into it, but just to say we have done a lot of data science, and we've seen for the health component, animals change their response to environmental changes when their immune system triggers, and that's somewhere around 90–91% accurate and statistically significant according to our data science. So we're now rolling this out and validating it further and demonstrating it in this project. Likewise, with the circadian rhythm, there are very clear signals that if a bird is compromised today, its recovery tomorrow should really only be in the morning prior to midday and not in the afternoon if it's in its natural rhythm. If we see lots of compensatory drinking and feeding and activity in the afternoon, that may be suggesting that they're not in their natural circadian rhythm, their biological rhythm. Effectively, they've got a sign of jet lag, if we were to put it into human terms. And this obviously has a knock-on to welfare, resilience around health, as well as productivity, and it could be a real-time metric that can be deployed very, very easily on mass scale. Next slide, please. So ongoing work really is connection to more farms to validate the data. As with all artificial intelligence and data models, we need more and more and more data to build the confidence in those models and do the analysis to ensure these aren't coincidental events, these are statistically significant. We want to do more extensive data science and also some validation on farm and some physical validation work we're doing as well to just make sure that the assessment of those birds at the slaughtering plant as well as on farm is matching what we're predicting and the data is suggesting. We're going to tune the AI models. Our artificial intelligence models can be tuned for accuracy as we get more and more data. And we want to get a better understanding of how we can use this AI on broiler farms beyond what we're doing. So what we're doing, let's remember, is taking pretty standard data that's available on many, many farms already and doing smart things with it. We don't care where the data comes from. There's no hardware needed. There's no software needed. We just grab what's out there and do clever things with it. We want more engagement with the industry because we've got to understand where the value creation is, hence one of the questions that will be coming up. We don't believe that all the value is just for live production. It should be much wider. And we're also validating the value creation and the eventual business model that can come from this. Should this be a Google Maps type model that the user, the farmer, is not the one who pays for it? Actually, it's other stakeholders who get more strategic value from it. And as a thank you for the farmer, they get the benefits of enhancing productivity whilst allowing their data to be used for the wider industry. That's the sort of Google Maps type model. Next slide, please. So expected outcomes, from part one, and the data science will be to validate that it's possible to detect changes in circadian rhythm. We very much believe it is. We're going to validate that again and ensure that we can detect this change in natural rhythms, the circadian rhythm. We'll validate that the circadian rhythm can then be linked to health, resilience and welfare. Again, our own data up till now suggests it can. We want to demonstrate in this project that that's true. We want to validate that you can rapidly spot the triggering of an immune response in these animals and these broilers. Currently, we believe we are seeing the innate immune response, which is predetermined, and that's before any immune cells are being generated within the animal. So it really is at the very early stage of a challenge to the immune system. And we want to validate that early detection of health and welfare challenges using these artificial intelligence derived data can lead to more rapid on-farm interventions. If we can't encourage and drive actions on farm in timely fashion, then actually all we're doing is building a lot of information and making no difference to the animals on farm or the productivity. And there's a lot of work within what we're doing and demonstrating that also uses artificial intelligence language models in a possible way of communicating to the farming people on the farms so that they do respond to the data. It's not just dashboarding and graphs as normal. Let's use new techniques. Next slide, please. So the implementation part is really industry-wide engagement is what we're expecting. Yes, farmers, but also equipment suppliers, integrations, the veterinarians and nutritionists, also insurance companies and the banking sector. We know insurance companies want to engage in this sort of thing to ensure they understand the risks of what they're insuring, particularly around some of the challenges like avian influenza, but also banking. We get green lending at preferential interest rates should there be ethical lending going forward. So a much wider industry engagement is where we're going. And also, as I've mentioned, this new consideration for who should pay. I'm really not sure that just putting subscriptions on farmers is the answer, and that may be one of the barriers that stopped a lot of technology getting out on farm historically. We will see. Next slide, please. So back to you, maybe, Peter, for the questions.
Yeah, well, one of the questions I asked earlier, how do we interest farmers to participate in the project? Has anyone in the meeting suggestions for us?
Hello, I'm Silvia Orlandini from ICOR. I don't know if it could be useful just to report that, because I'm also a member of ISO IDF International Dairy Federation. Of course, this what I'm saying is more specific for the dairy sector, but they have a WhatsApp group of farmers, and you cannot imagine how much it works well. So because really, it's really the direct voice of the farmer. There is any buffer in the middle, and there is no, to say, they simply report their problem. They simply report what their opinion, are very direct chat. So I'm in the chat, and sometimes I'm really surprised how much they are active and how much is interesting sometimes. So I'm not saying if you are interested, we could speak with IDF about that, or we can create such idea for this purpose, for example. I don't know. It's just an example.
Yeah, I think it's a really valuable comment, and what we're finding is that these farmers maybe don't want dashboards, graphs, and to sit at the computer, and that's why they like the WhatsApp. It's very much a social chat function, and I think that's where we're also looking using the language models. Can we have the AI language model? And we do post within WhatsApp from our language model. So therefore, can you get it where the AI is able to engage in a chat, or at least get the farmers engaged and then let the farmers chat human to human? But really interesting idea, make that network through a chat group. I think there was a question I saw pop up in the chat about the size of farmer we're targeting. For this demonstration project, we really don't mind. As long as we can take the data from the control panels. We have some clients with 1 barn, we have some clients with 500 barns or 5,000 barns. So the size of farmer doesn't really matter to us as long as we can get the data from their panels.
Anyone else suggestions, remarks? Then go to the next question we have. Well, who shall pay for the? I think this is the last question, but anyway, who will pay for the services? As things are now, in a lot of cases the farmer has to pay for it, and as David already also mentioned, there are others that have benefit. But how can we have a business model?
The $1 million question.
Farmers unions.
Yeah, farmer unions, that's a good idea. Yeah, groups, yeah.
But then it's still paid by the farmer. Other organizations that could pay.
Yeah, I guess it's indirect, isn't it? So at least is it within your membership rather than, because it could benefit the group as a whole rather than an individual farmer.
Yeah. Do you think that slaughterhouses might be interested?
Yeah, I very much believe the wider supply chain, and actually the wider supply chain, including the equipment manufacturers for the ventilation equipment, the lighting equipment, the feeding equipment, they may have some interest in some of this information of how their products are working, as well as what we think of supply chain post-farm, the processors and the retailers. But yeah, definitely. Interesting retailers. We've had some early conversations. They really like this sort of thing, but they're very nervous to make it compulsory within their supply chains, because that's actually quite a fragile relationship between the supply chain and the retailer. But it's very much welcomed when they encourage it and suggest they like it. But quite a challenge to get them to spend money on some things on farm.
Okay, thank you all for the suggestions.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think the question possibility was earlier, but is there room for questions, or should we continue with the next presentation?
We'll continue with the presentations. As we said, the Q&A session will be later down.
Okay, thank you.
Webinar.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jana Marczewka, and I will move on with the next presentation of case study B. I represent myself, Institute of Genetics and Animal Biotechnology of the Polish Academy of Science, and case study B is executed together with the Danish Technological Institute. And in this presentation, I will address a slightly different level of information than in case that was addressed in case study A. We deal more with public sector and legislative aspects. So we can go to next slide. First, I would like to introduce the term of traceability and the system of traces. Please go to the next slide. So European Union enforces strict regulations to protect consumers, environment, and fair competition. And these controls ensure that the products entering and circulating EU market meet high safety, are healthy, and have the high environmental standards. And food and in the area of food and agriculture, which is actually most heavily regulated sector, the key directives are EU food safety law, EU farm to fork strategy, and part of those is the traces NT system, which monitors animal health, food imports, and plant health control. We can go to the next slide. And why actually traceability is critical. So in the time when the global regulations such as EU deforestation regulation or corporate sustainability reporting directive are being developed and implemented. Continuously, the product origin and sustainability needs to be proven. But also consumers expect customers expect the proof of ethical sourcing, sustainability, and fair trade practices. But modern supply chains are very complex, involve multiple suppliers, intermediaries, and different law in different countries, and therefore adaptable tracking solutions are required. And this poses many challenges, like the aspect that one-size-fits-all solutions is not really practical. There is a lack of interoperability between different supply chain management platforms, or to collect real-time data from different sources, sensors, geolocations, and transaction records is very difficult. So customizable traceability solutions would allow business to help them to conduct trace the products and their business in each of the supply chains. We can go further. And EU, what is the impact of those regulations from EU? For sure, it ensures consumers' trust in product safety and quality. It prevents entering to EU of products which we don't want on our market. It harmonizes EU-wide trade and makes it easier for business to sell across Europe. And a strong traceability is important also to advertise their products for manufacturers and importers. And as those regulations evolve, industries must continuously adapt to new safety and sustainability requirements. We can go to the next slide. All the industry and producers in Europe nowadays need to follow the ESG standards, so environmental, social, and governance, which refers to sustainable practices, ethical labor conditions, and transparent governance. And traceability is a tool to prove those practices. So actually, regulations demand more transparency. Companies must prove sustainability claims. Consumers and investors expect responsible sourcing, and market competitiveness depends on this. We can go to the next slide. So there is this traceability related to private sector and to public sector. So as I mentioned, private sector needs traceability to meet buyer and retailer requirements, to ensure supply chain efficiency and fraud prevention, comply with certification, to improve brand, and to be competitive on the global markets. And on the other hand, industry wants traceability for commercial advantage, while EU requires traceability for consumer safety. And there is no universal framework for some sectors. Some are very regulated and some are not very regulated. And operators must navigate multiple overlapping requirements, increasing compliance complexity. And in the future, the challenge is to align industry-driven and regulatory-driven traceability into more unified, efficient system. We can go to the next slide. So here comes in a tool which is called TracesNT, which is a trade control and expert system of European Commission. This is an online platform which aims at facilitating electronic certification and tracking of agri-food trade, ensuring safety, transparency, and compliance with EU regulations. This is a public sector tool, but of course it addresses activities of the industry. So the benefits of using traces are that it simplifies certification, so streamlines health and trade documents for imports, exports, and movements in the EU. It enhances transparency, so the tracking across borders can be done. It improves efficiency, It reduces to some extent paperwork, speeds up customs and veterinary procedures, and supports compliance, ensures adherence to EU safety and animal health standards. But there are also many challenges related to that system. Even though it's been evolving since 2004 and it's being continuously updated. So the challenges are technical integration. It still requires harmonization with the national systems. It requires more user adaptation, so training and transition for stakeholders. Data security and reliability, so managing sensitive trade data securely. And it requires to be updated regularly because of the changes in the legislation, which is actually done quite fast. And those challenges open window for our work in this case study. We can go to the next slide. But it's also important that there are some commercial add-ons to Traces NT, even though the system is closed because it's managed by Digi Sante and industry has no chance to update the system itself. Some companies produce or develop solutions which are let's say helping users in various ways. So I will please go to the next slide. So for example, there are options of location tracking and data collection, which help to categorize locations based on industry needs, and geolocation tracking for precise origin verification and regulatory compliances. Product and unit level traceability, so flexible tracking of different commodities, support of various measurement units because those change across regions. There are some ways to integrate with certification documents from various sources, and also there are tools which can be used to help introduce data in a uniform system to Traces NT. So we can go to the next slide. So the benefits are mainly related to adding things to Traces NT are being more prepared to introduce data in a quicker and easier way. For example, some regulations, I will give later on an example of EU deforestation directive, helps to introduce data in a simpler way. There is reduced risk of making mistakes when introducing data. So there is more operational efficiency. So the real-time monitoring and reporting can be introduced. It also helps with markets from other continents. And solutions can help business to grow next to the emerging regulatory changes. We can go to the next slide. I have prepared one question now for the audience. So I would like to ask, should traceability compliance be driven primarily by regulation, or should industry take voluntary market-driven approach? So yes, there is the scale below. So we would be very happy if you could indicate your opinion or your answer to this question. For the moment, both options are taking place, but as I mentioned, to sum up what I said till now, is that they are not necessarily aligned. I see more people in favor of both approaches are equally effective. Okay, I hope the rest of my presentation will give a little bit more perspective on this question. So yes, And the helping question, which is, I think, an open question here, what are the risks and benefits of each approach? From my point of view, the risk of having the regulatory approach is that it doesn't always suit the need of the industry. And as I said, the industries are very different. It's very hard to make one fit for all. And of course, if something is enforced from, let's say, from top, it becomes really sometimes a hinder in developing business, especially when we deal with markets from outside of EU. Because as we know, for example, in livestock production, EU is much more regulated, and let's say many more regulations are enforced as compared to other continents. So we are losing this disadvantage here. But of course, product quality and consumer trust are increased in this approach. Okay, I think we can move on to the next regulatory. Yeah, we can go to the case study B. So now moving on to our work, we can go to the next slide. To define the case study B, which we execute in the Digi4Live project, we focus on leveraging Trace's NT and digital tools to enhance animal welfare, environment monitoring, and transport optimization. And we focus on the key players, so animal producers, transporters, veterinary authorities, IT providers, and regulatory bodies. And we try to provide insights of the current challenges and discuss benefits of integrating some innovative solutions like real-time databases with GP tracking, transport logs, and welfare data. And by identifying gaps, validating digital applications, and piloting automation concepts both in Poland and Denmark on 3 species, so beef, poultry, and pigs. We hope that this will help the sector to improve the traceability of livestock across Europe. We can go to the next slide. So what are the aspects I mentioned of potential improvements? So sustainability, adding sustainability metrics. So new data can be based on the environmental impact data can be added to the system, which is not done currently. Enhanced animal welfare tracking can be introduced. So for example, digital transport logs for welfare and health monitoring. And some improvements in policy and governance can be done to adjust traces to the exact development of EU livestock transport policies. And hopefully it would strengthen the resilience and transparency in EU supply chain. More data-driven decisions could be done, and it would align better with the EU policy regarding sustainability. We can go to the next slide. The outcome of our case study are guidelines. It's not a real, let's say, solution. This project doesn't give us space for developing real IT solutions, but we will analyze all the possible options, or hopefully all the possible options. So we will analyze solutions on automation and optimization of data collection, on smart digital solutions, and we will finally produce best practice guidelines on that. And we hope that the benefits for particular stakeholder groups will be for farmers and transporters, reduced paperwork, better route optimization and compliance ease. For regulators, more transparent real-time monitoring of livestock movements and welfare. And for IT and data providers, opportunities for system integration and innovation in digital livestock tracking. We can go to the next slide. What has been already done? We've been in contact in both countries with stakeholders. We did the stakeholder mapping exercise. So we focused on the aspects of power, legitimacy, and urgency, who keeps which role in the supply or in the chain. We know that by now. We have listed current gaps in both countries in traces. What are the challenges for the stakeholders? We did it based on the interviews. And we have explored existing smart digital applications and options for integrations. And the next steps are to prepare recommendation for traces and to prepare a framework to enhance sustainability, efficiency, and transparency in livestock supply chain based on data collection. And now we can go to the next slide. So from the exercise where we interviewed the stakeholders, the main challenges of traces we have identified were for Poland, fragmentation of data systems, administrative burden of the traces NT system, standardization gaps, resource constraints, operational limitations, and fragmented stakeholder engagement. And in Denmark, the challenges listed were fairly similar, the integration complexity, the digitalization issues, the user interface issues, some data quality gaps. In Denmark, the users reported downtime risks where a system is not operating, and this really hinders the industry because we talk about movements of products which have short expiration dates or live animals. There are issues with data standardization, rigid controls, and of course, limited funding. We can go to the next slide. So our plans to collect data for economic and environmental assessment are based actually on the stakeholders' input, and yes, we would like to, but I will address it in next slides because there will be specific needs which we would like to indicate, and maybe we can hope on your help as well in this area. We can go to the next slide. And here I would like quickly to give you the example of EU deforestation regulation, which is a little bit similar to the case we are discussing, because we can go to the next slide. So nowadays, producers need to, or the chain needs to report if the product come from areas which were deforested. And surprisingly, this information, when the commodities are transported from outside of Europe, but also in EU, this information about the origin of the product, if it comes from the deforested or not deforested area, is done through Traces NT. And this shows a small aspect, one type of information, very, let's say, direct information, which is introduced to the Traces NT system. And actually, it has been planned for some years how to do that. The regulations came in 2020, and it was supposed to be introduced in 2024 for large and medium companies, and in 25 for small and micro enterprises. For the moment, it has been postponed by 12 months. But some further postpones are predicted. And it really is very difficult to introduce this one small information into such huge system as Traces NT. And companies must really prepare compliant supply chains and collect accurate deforestation-free data. And EU regulators will monitor and enforce compliance after the new deadlines. We can go to the next slide. And this similar regulatory approach is being considered for animal welfare and environmental impact in supply chain to be introduced into Traces NT system. And this is actually a big part of our work, because we try to help the chain to prepare for that kind of additions of information to Traces NT. We can go to the next slide. So what's the difference between this deforestation information and animal compliance, animal welfare compliance information? Deforestation is one-time historical event. Once land is cleared, it does not change back. Compliance relies on geolocation data and satellite images. The traceability is straightforward because, yes, the land use changes are permanent. And with regard to animal welfare data, that data is very dynamic and complex. Animal welfare requires continuous monitoring throughout the supply chain. For some species, there are many standards and many welfare indicators to be collected. Measurement challenges are multiple. For example, we can collect transport conditions, health indicators, handling practices, so on. And there are lack of harmonized standards across countries and operators. We can go to the next slide. So there are also some species of animals which are not covered by EU law yet. For example, sheep and goats, fish welfare, rabbit and ducks, or even turkeys. So in this case, it will be very difficult. We can go to the next slide. So where EU law does not regulate, countries and retailers set their own standards. And this is done, for example, in Germany and Sweden and the Netherlands. But different national standards make harmonization really difficult for EU-wide digital compliance systems like Traces NT. We can go to the next slide. So what can be done to consider this addition of animal welfare information into Traces NT? Standardized welfare metrics should be developed. The central database also should be, of that information should be developed, which could link to Traces NT. There should be different rules considered for different species, and the real-time monitoring needs to be developed because the transport is a dynamical activity. So before a new directive is introduced, significant work is needed to harmonize welfare regulations, define monitoring standards, and upgrade Traces to handle continuous animal welfare data tracking. We can go to the next slide. So my question was to you if there are any gaps in current animal welfare tracking that make compliance difficult for stakeholders. And this is a very difficult question, I guess, because some of those gaps I listed in my previous slides. If any of you has any opinion on those potential gaps, I think yes, the biggest, but I will let you think about it for a second.
Joanna, maybe in the meantime, Valerio has a question in the chat box. Maybe you can reply while they're writing.
Yes.
Have you explored the possibility to integrate Traces with FSDN to have a more comprehensive tracking system that includes sustainability data?
I would need some help with what FSDN stands for.
It's the new version of Farm Accountancy Data Network, but Farm Sustainability Data Network.
Yes, we mainly focus, and as we promised in the proposal, to focus on animal welfare and environmental aspects, not on the economic part of it, because Traces doesn't really deal with economics. This is another let's say aspect which is, I guess, internally controlled by the industry themselves. And probably by the tax aspects and the taxation over, yes, so I guess, but for sure there are some plans also to enlarge Traces with such information, but for the moment we try to focus on welfare and on environmental aspects. But thanks for the hint, and we will also take it under account when we prepare our work. Yes, another question which we let's say wonder and which we try to look for the answer for is what improvements could be made to ensure real-time welfare monitoring during transport, which is something that EU has been considering, but it's really difficult considering who will be responsible for the sensors, how the information will be handled, and so on and so on. So this is something that for sure is being considered on the EU level, but it's also a very big challenge. But I think we can go to the next slide. And the last aspect I would like to discuss is the environmental aspect of transport, which is currently not considered in traces, but for other purposes in EU on let's say the data that is being collected for other purposes are CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions, fuel consumption, route efficiency, and empty returns rates, and energy use in cold storage. So this is what EU is interested in, and that data is not included in traces for the moment. We can go to the next slide. Operators also need to record such information as transport duration and distance, vehicle type and engine efficiency, stopovers and resting conditions, air quality and temperature control, and compliance with emission standards. So that type of data we are considering and how this information could be linked to traces and what would be the most efficient use of such data, which in any case is collected anyways. We can go to the next slide. So to sum up, in the current system, and especially in environmental side, there is no real-time tracking of emissions and welfare combined. There is no integrated reporting system for operators to submit transport and environmental data together. And there is limited cross-border standardization because different countries apply different levels of monitoring. We can go to the next slide. So what we would be interested to know and how we would like to ask you for input and feedback. We can go to the next slide. For sure, we need more insights on challenges and gaps in livestock transport data collection and digital tracking. We would need feedback on the usability of proposed automation and optimization solutions, which we propose. And those would need to be validated for smart digital applications in supply chains, and how we think you may contribute to that. So for sure, please participate in stakeholder interviews and surveys, join workshops to discuss digital tracking improvements as you've been doing today. And we would be grateful for feedback on case-specific regulatory and operational challenges. So probably if the report comes out, we would be grateful on your input for that. We can go to the next slide. And for different types of stakeholders, it would be great to get information from. So for example, from farmers and transporters, it's really, of course, difficult to get real data insight, which is not easy, but we try to look for such information. We try to engage regulatory authorities to help with our work, and we discuss with IT providers to get more insight into integration and interoperability of digital tools. So we can go to the next slide. So in detail, we would be happy to get insight into AI tools and geolocation information and digital transport monitoring. We look for some other pilot studies where such information is being collected, and those may also be other case studies within Digi4Live project. And yes, we would like to focus on looking at those solutions in general for EU-wide livestock tracking improvements. We can go to the next slide. And that would be all for today. Thank you very much. I'm happy to answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Luana. Now, as we can see, next up is Jean-Pierre Bidanel for the integration of different technologies, including animal breeding. Jean, you can take it.
Okay, thank you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to participate to this webinar, in which my colleague Eliel and I are going to talk about the impact of new digital technologies in the animal breeding sector. The title of the case study talks about integration, mainly because animal breeding is essentially an integrative discipline, as we will see. Next slide, please. First of all, I would like to remind that for decades, animal breeding has played a central role in livestock science, enabling animal population to be improved in a way that can be accumulated over time. This improvement has been achieved by defining selection strategies and more precisely selection objectives that take into account the various traits to be improved. For decades, these traits were essentially economic efficiency traits, but today they are more balanced and take into account the three pillars of sustainability, that is to say, environmental, social, and economic consideration. Environmental issues include things like adaptation and mitigation to global warming, reducing pollutions, preserving biodiversity. Social issues include health consideration, not only animal, but global health consideration, animal welfare, food quality and security, but also the image and attractivity of the livestock sector. Economic issues, of course, include economic sustainability, competitivity, at all levels, including farmers' income to consumer purchasing power. But this balance between these different issues also means increased complexity. Next slide, please. And we think that digital technologies are key to address this complexity. For instance, they will help us to phenotype traits that have been very difficult to measure in the past, such as health or behavioral traits, to provide detailed description of production environments, both physical, like temperature, humidity, etc., or biological environment, for instance, the microbial situation on the farm, and facilitate the integration of data from a wide range of sources. We can have sources from farms, of course, but also from different laboratories, from slaughterhouses, and we need to make them interoperable. Next slide, please. Digital technologies also offer new opportunities, such as the possibility to track animals within a group, which can be useful, for instance, for taking into account social interactions between animals, or follow pedigrees, for instance, assigning an egg to its hen, but to the hen that laid it. It can be useful to what I call revisit the use of standard traits. For instance, looking at deviation in feed or water intake curves may indicate health problems. High throughput data used for genomic selection can also be very useful, for instance, for better management of genetic diversity. And lastly, new things like digital twins can enable us to manage our livestock system more quickly, in real time, to be more reactive at the herd or the breeding programs level. And next slide, please. Of course, we cannot deal with all these questions raised by the use of digital technologies in animal breeding, in this case study, and we have chosen to deal with it in the following way. We have started by asking a few key players in the genetic sectors, breeding organization, but also users of genetics about their position and their expectations with regard to digital technologies, including data sharing, which is one of the objectives for Digi4Live. We will follow it by a questionnaire, which has been built based on these first interviews on a wider scale. Another area linked to the fact that animal breeders need very diverse data aims at identifying the obstacle to data interoperability and the solutions that can be proposed to improve this interoperability using either traditional methods of standardization, traits and data exchange formats, but also more innovative solutions based, for instance, on the use of data dictionaries, ontologies, and using IA. We will seek to apply this to health and behavioral traits, which are often collected for purpose other than animal breeding, and represent a major challenge to be used for genetic improvement. Finally, the growing importance of high throughput data raises specific questions about quality control and the use of data, which we will address using a specific case device, which my colleague Eliel will present to you. Next slide, please. I will just finish by briefly mentioning the questionnaire that we'll propose. We'll try to get answers about the current use of digital technologies in the animal breeding sector, and try to get some information on the views of everyone on the main challenges and the expectations from the various actors of the sector regarding these new technologies, and focus a little bit on sharing data to boost the competitivity of our business. Then I will now give talk to my colleague Eliel for next slide, please.
Hello, thank you, Jean-Pierre. Just to give you a concrete example of the technology work or way that we are considering in this case study. This is a technology that we have been evaluating mainly in small ruminant and basically in sheep as animal model here in France. Next, please. Just a little bit of history. You all know probably that weighing animals in the farm is one of the most conventional and critical practice used for several purposes, like, for example, assessing body condition, weight gain, assessing the health conditions and nutritional status of individual animals, but also flocks, and just to respond to feeding programs or setting some slaughtering schedules. Weighing animals is also traditional measure using conventional static weighing system, which required the animals to be individually worked onto a set of scales and to measure once the animal is in the equilibrium. So this process, we know that all that is time consumer, labor intensive, and places a lot of stress on both animals, but also in the operator. And we know that indoor, this task is relatively easy, but when you go outdoor, it can be a very difficult task. And the reality in the field at the end of the day is that we have a lot of problems to weigh animals, and farmers in the real life conditions almost doesn't weight their individuals, and this puts a lot of problem if we have some breeding goals concerning using live weight as a key parameter for phenotyping and genotyping in the future. So next, please. So as an alternative to these static scales, what it is so-called the gold standard method for weighing the individuals in livestock production, we have been working the technology of worker weighing system. So this system uses the principle of weighing, which consists the animals have to pass through a path in a voluntary way, which allows that the body mass is estimating in the continuous walking movement using averaging techniques. And we have in the past, since the 80s, some previous Angura experience in cattle, mainly in Australia, but in small ruminants, the experience in New Zealand, but also in Australia, have been discouraging. But we assume the challenge here in France, and we developed this original worker weighing system with it's a crate that we have been working since 2015 to overcome these obstacles. Next, please. So very quickly, the systems measure in a remote weight, the body weight individually and daily of sheep, which can be indoor or outdoor in a large range of system. The design of the prototype considered the energy autonomy using solar panels, the weight of the device in the way that we can transport, and we can, for example, in rotational grazing system, we can put the system in different areas. In a ranchland, for example, so it must be light and must be also resistant to outdoor conditions, so to winter, for example, raining, etc. So how the animal is weighed in this voluntary crate, the animal cross voluntarily stimulated by some attractive elements that are in the other side of the crate. The antenna reads the individual identification, which is mostly in the left ear of the sheep, and send this value to the reader, which is placed in the right side of the corridor. The reader saves the passage in a file and sends the weight to the indicator, which records the individual identification, the body weight of the animal, the date, the time of passage in an Excel file, which must be interpreted afterward for decision makings by the operator. Next, please. So this system is completed by the shape is shape at the entrance of the work platform, which is designed to control the flow and to avoid congestion, which is very important in gregarious species like small ruminant and basically sheep. Next, please. So, and this is just a simplified paddock plan of the setup, just to allow the unidirectional circuit that we evaluate here, just to complete the technology. And the attractor zone can use water, mineral salts, the tree shade during the summer, or some scratcher, for example, just to stimulate welfare and to stimulate the passage through the corridor. This is very quickly just to illustrate the technology. Next, please. So with this technology, we have been producing a lot of data in a lot of farming systems and with a lot of animal categories. So data production is automatic without human intervention, and we can have a lot of daily individual live weight data in a large spectrum of conditions. But this high volume of data must be filtered, because we have also, this is in the second block of the slide, a high volume of outliers. So animals pass very quickly, for example, two animals at the same time, etc. And to do it, we developed with a mathematician in RAE, which belongs to this project also, an algorithm that is so-called Cafino for the automatic outlier removal. And just to vehicle this Cafino algorithm, we also developed within the Oriol web application, which is freely available in the web. This Oriol web application allows to clean and to link the data set to the end user just to produce automatic illustration, graphics, etc. Right now, we have developing a smartphone application for the easy on-field data access and to use by end users with the possibility to develop early warning system in the future. Next, please. So as I said, the feasibility of using the system have been evaluated in a large spectrum of conditions in temperate, but also in Mediterranean, small ruminant conditions, and indoor or outdoor, for meat or for dairy. And the finality, we focus in the animal breeding goals, the finality and the utility of the worker weighing asset technology is that we are able now to make individual real-time live weight monitoring just to detect health issues, welfare issues, environment, making the link with the environmental conditions, etc. This allows us to phenotype individuals and to detect the intraflock variability, for example, in one important trait today, like robustness in the current climate change context, which is a very important issue for the future. We can evaluate the constant flock life weight progress, like, for example, for monitoring or to detect anomalies, for example, abortions, the presence or absence of individuals in the flock at a precise date, the predation event, for example, that we have a lot of problem here in France, mainly in ranchland with wolf. We can also make a deep physiological interpretations such as fetus growth in function of the litter size, lamb sex, relationship with live weight, lambing, etc. And we are now developing early warning system with the possibility of using at the farmer level a very easy smartphone application. Next, please. And that's all. It's, if you want more information about that, we have several publications. We have also some videos in the YouTube channel that you can see in the slide. I'm happy to answer some questions if you have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the presentation, Jean-Pierre and Eliel. Now we are at the part of our Q&A session. If anybody has any questions directed to our presenters or speakers, please, you can now ask them, or you can write down in the chat and we will continue from there. Well, seeing as, yes, no, there are no questions and there are nobody putting up their hands, we can say again, thank you to the speakers for presenting and being part of the webinar, as well as for the audience who are with us and listening carefully to all of the information given. Our next, we can use this time now to promote our next webinar that will be the Digi4Live Webinar Series Part 2, Harnessing Robust AI and Data Spaces for Animal Tracking, Sustainability Assessment, and governance. It will be held on the 19th of March 2025 from again 11 a.m. until 12:30 p.m. Central European time. You can find a QR code to the sign up sheet for the second webinar, and we will be shortly putting the link into the chat. So if you don't have your mobile phone next to you, you can just use the one in the chat. Again, thank you to all the presenters. Thank you to the audience. It was a very insightful webinar, as we can see. Once again, I want to even thank Eba from EFAB, who was the mind behind the clicking, and Chala for assisting and giving additional information during the webinar. We can go to the next slide again. Yes, you can join our stakeholder list by going to our website or using the QR code right now on the screen. And you can follow us on our social media platforms that are LinkedIn, YouTube, where the recording will be available in the next upcoming weeks. Our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Once again, thank you everybody for attending, and we'll see each other hopefully on the next edition of the webinar series.